Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth with you for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. I am very excited about this week's new release because it is time to get back to the beach. Strawberry Sands Beach, to be precise. This week's new release is There I Find Joy. It's the fourth book in Jessie Gussman's Strawberry Sands Beach Sweet Romance series, and I'll have more about the story and a live preview reading for you in just a bit. And by the way, that preview, if you've not listened to the first three books, does contain some very mild spoilers, but spoilers all the same, so be aware. But before we get into all that, Jessie, as you know, has been including dishes within the scope of her stories, and I've been making those dishes for you here. And that's what we're going to do here today with another edition of Cooking with Jay. Now, this is a special recipe to me because this recipe comes from the special Kerful Shenanalooza event that Jessie had back in the spring on her Facebook reader chat group. We had a recipe contest, and we had lots and lots of wonderful recipes submitted. And this was one which, if I'm being honest, I've made lots of great recipes that were submitted, but this is the one that my house has made more times than any other. It's very simple, it's delicious, and it's very quick to make too. It's June Shepherd's Chicken Alfredo Bread Boat. So sit back and let's take a look at how to make this. Oh, as always, don't worry about trying to capture the ingredients and directions and any of that. The full recipe is going to be listed down in the description of this video down below. You may have to hit see more or show all or whatever it says on your particular device. But with that, let's get started. So our ingredients are pretty simple. You're going to need, obviously, bread for the bread boat, a loaf of French bread, any size or particular style that you have is fine. Then you're going to need some Alfredo sauce. Again, your favorite variety is perfectly fine. You're going to need some shredded and cooked chicken. Rotisserie chicken is perfect for this. You're going to need some Parmesan and mozzarella cheese. You're going to need some cooked and crumbled bacon. I'm using roughly 6 slices here. You're going to need some petite diced tomatoes, and if you're using canned, as I am, you're going to want to make sure those are drained very, very well. Also, for what it's worth, I found a variety that has like olive oil and oregano and garlic in it already, and I think that worked really, really well. And you're also going to need some garlic powder for seasoning. My friend and friend of this channel, Susan Goodman, actually suggested that black olives might be really good in this. I happen to have some, so I'm going to use those as well. Of course, that is entirely optional. So the first step, preheat your oven to 400 degrees, and then very carefully cut off the top of your French bread. Set that aside. You can use that for garlic bread. You could dip it into some garlic-infused olive oil or something like that, or you could just do what I did and eat it while you're making this recipe. You want to scoop out the bread to make a boat. Again, don't waste that bread. It is absolutely wonderful while you're cooking this. Once you've got your bread boat ready, you want to layer in some of your Alfredo sauce. I like to put a reasonable amount, but not too thick a layer yet. You're going to layer in some mozzarella cheese, and then top that generously with garlic powder. For the next step, layer in your chicken. All right, here is where I have to jump in and say that I really love technology, I truly do, but sometimes it just lets you down. In this case, for whatever reason, my camera stopped recording, and I missed capturing a few of the next steps. Fortunately for you guys, I'm an audiobook narrator. You're used to hearing my voice and imagining the scene in your heads. So let's try that here, shall we? In the meantime, please enjoy these scenes of me waking up my perfectly contented cat from a nap in her little cat tree. Okay, continuing on. After you get the chicken layered in, you add more garlic powder, again sprinkle it on generously. Then add a layer of the diced tomatoes. Now, you want to cover the chicken well. Next, you add another layer of your sauce. This time I like to get the layer a little thicker because it is going to seep down through the other layers a bit. This was also the point where I added my optional black olives. Next, you're going to top that with your bacon. All right, and this was the point at which I realized my error and started the camera up again, so this is what it looks like with the bacon on top. And we're almost done. The last remaining steps are to add more mozzarella cheese and then top that with Parmesan cheese. Finally, you're going to top that loosely with foil. Very loosely is fine. This is just to shield the cheese from being over-browned while it cooks. After you top it with foil, you're going to put it in the oven and bake at 400 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes, and remove that foil halfway through. Ladies and gentlemen, here is what it looks like fresh out of the oven. It is ready to serve. Let's cut it open so you can get a good look at the delicious goodness inside. And man, this is making me hungry again just from seeing this. And that's all there is to it. It is really, truly that simple, and I hope you guys will try it. If you do, please let me know how it goes down in the comments. All right, let's talk about this week's new release here on Say with Jay, There I Find Joy. There I Find Joy is the story of Luke Landry. We've met members of the Landry family in the previous books, and Luke has a bit of a challenge in front of him, because this is also the story of Kristen Shower. And Kristen's grandmother, Miss Heather, has made it her mission in life to find someone for her granddaughter to marry. And her sights have been set on Luke. So Luke has spent a great deal of time and energy avoiding both Kristen and her grandmother. But when circumstances occur that require them to make some fairly significant personal sacrifices each to help save the lives, literally, of a little girl and her sister, will they be willing to make those sacrifices and in those sacrifices maybe find something more? Well, you know you're going to have to come back this Friday for the full release to find out. But here is a few of the opening minutes of There I Find Joy. I hope you enjoy it, and then come back this Friday for the full release here on Say with Jay. Can I talk to you for a second, Luke? Luke set the bag of groceries that he had just picked up for his mother down on her kitchen table and looked her in the eye. "You know, when I was a kid, those words struck fear into my heart." She laughed a little, but it was lacking her usual jovial nature, and his heart really did squeeze a little. Was there something wrong?
"Well, I guess this shouldn't strike fear into you, but this does have the potential to change your life."
"Mom, just spit it out, because you're scaring me." He said the words with a smile, but there was a note of seriousness behind them. Typically, she did not start their conversations like this. He was almost 30 years old and had been out of the house for years, although he still lived on the farm, in a small cottage on the upper side of the pasture. He could look out the window and see horses grazing in the field. He'd grown up in this house and on this farm, right along the shores of Lake Michigan. It had been a tough life. The grass wasn't exactly plentiful, and they had to work hard in order to have enough hay to feed the horses that they rented out to tourists so they could ride along the beach. But he loved it, loved the lake, loved the farm, and horses were in his blood. He loved the town, too, although sometimes it did get a little old, having everyone know everyone else's business. Particularly Miss Heather, who was constantly trying to get him to marry her granddaughter, Kristen. He'd taken to avoiding town completely, because it seemed like every time he went, Miss Heather figured it out through the grapevine and was there to waylay him somehow.
"This is about Becky."
His mother twisted her hands in front of her, then turned toward the cupboard and pulled out a coffee mug. She didn't drink coffee, so he wasn't surprised when she pulled out a couple of the chocolate-covered espresso beans that she had become addicted to over the last few months, and popped two in her mouth. Becky was the orphan that the town had pretty much adopted. They had been shuffling her from house to house, everyone taking a turn at keeping her, while they figured out her foster situation. Someone in the town was connected to someone at Blueberry Beach who had pulled a few strings at the state level to allow them to do things a bit differently. Becky had run away from her original foster home because she wanted to be with her sister Rita, who was fostered by a couple in Strawberry Sands. Everyone could sympathize with her, since Becky had nothing in the world except her sister. Luke had taken his turn at keeping her for the day, while his mom had kept her for the night. He and Becky had gone for a long ride along the beach, which Becky had seemed to love. Then they'd eaten ice cream, and Becky had helped him take care of the horses. That was her normal job at the other horse stable in Strawberry Sands. "Did they find a home for her?" he asked, wondering if he maybe needed some of those espresso beans, because his mother's face had not smoothed out.
"Kind of,"
his mother said, and he felt like she was hedging. "What are you not telling me?" he asked, and he did reach over to the coffee mug she held and picked two beans out for himself. He stuck them in his mouth, crunched down, and immediately regretted it. He had no idea what his mother saw in those things, but they tasted awful. He walked over to the garbage can and spit them out. His mother watched him, and he couldn't figure out whether the look in her eye was because she was annoyed that he wasted two of her beans, or if it was because she couldn't quite figure out how to tell him what she obviously was having trouble spitting out. "Mom, whatever it is, I'll handle it. Just tell me."
"All right. I really don't know how else to say this. Becky enjoyed her time with you, and she wants you to be her dad."
He forgot all about the bitter taste which still clung to his tongue as he stared at his mother. "Me?" he managed to squeak out. Then he cleared his throat. "She wants me?" That was so odd. His oldest brother Matt was in a stable relationship and already had a home and family. His sister Sunday already had a kid. His mom was the kind of woman that every kid loved, and even his younger sister Clara had just moved to Strawberry Sands with her boss, and they would soon be planning a wedding as well. He was the third child, a bit of a loose cannon, and he never really had even a steady girlfriend. He dated a few times, but he was terrible at dating because he didn't focus on the things that everyone else thought was so important. Plus, the whole town knew he had a long-standing feud with Kristen, the woman whose Graham continuously tried to get him to marry her. And, truth be told, he kind of enjoyed it. He thought she did too. Their animosity dated back to junior high and a fateful sailboat trip, although he figured he was probably the only one who still remembered that. No, that wasn't true. Kristen wouldn't have forgotten either. They both thought they were going to die. He shook those memories away and tried to focus on the issue at hand. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.